I climbed up the familiar steps of the house that was supposed to be my home, my shoes tapping against the worn wooden planks. The porch belonged to an opulent Victorian mansion that stood tall 80 years ago. Nestled in a posh neighborhood, where manicured lawns grace every street and shiny cars sparkle under the bright sun, this land had been in my wife's family for generations, handed down like a priceless heirloom. My wife, Camilla, and I got married with the dream of building a future together, of starting a family, of spending the rest of our lives side by side. But I had been mistaken. The towering ceilings, the squeaky floors, the grand rooms, I thought they were ours. But every passing day made it clearer. Camilla loved this house more than she loved me. She had spent her childhood here, running through these very halls, gathering roses from the yard. She used to tell me stories about the garden, about how her father had planted those roses before he passed away, how he would spend hours tending to them. Her attachment to each bloom was more than nostalgia. It was a devotion, a reminder that this house wasn't just a place to live. It was her family's legacy, and she saw herself not just as its owner, but as its guardian. For a time, I thought I was part of that I belonged here. But everything changed 6 months ago. Her mother, Helen, and her sister, Clarissa, moved in. Helen had sold her place, and Clarissa, due to some bad money decisions, lost her apartment. I didn't fight it. Family is family, right? That's what I told myself. But ever since they arrived, I felt it. The shift. The way the house no longer felt like mine. I wasn't a husband anymore. I was a tenant, a walking ATM, someone who paid the bills but didn't belong. I'm a financial consultant, making more than enough to keep the lights on, to keep the fridge stocked, to maintain this massive house. I work long hours, crunching numbers, helping people secure their futures. Yet when I come home, it feels like I'm walking into someone else's world. Helen, with her sharp tongue, constantly reminds me that I didn't grow up with their kind of history. Clarissa barely acknowledges me unless she needs something, and Camilla, she lets it happen. Smiling, pretending everything is fine, while I fade into the background. Tonight was Helen's birthday. I had spent all day preparing. After work, I stopped by the store and picked out a nice bottle of red wine, her favorite. I bought a silver bracelet. Small charms shaped like flowers, a tribute to the garden she always talked about. I even helped set up the dining room, rearranging chairs, placing the tablecloth, making sure everything looked perfect. It wasn't easy after a long day, but I wanted to show I cared, that I was part of this family. Camila had been buzzing with excitement since morning, eager about the party, and for a moment, I let myself believe that tonight would be different. That maybe, just maybe, they'd see me as more than just the man who signed the checks. I should have known better. As I stood on the porch, my hand on the doorknob, a knot tightened in my gut. Something was off. I felt it before I even stepped inside. This wasn't going to be a celebration. This was going to be the night I finally saw the truth. The night I realized exactly how little I mattered in this house that was supposed to be mine. The air smelled like rain as I pulled the door open, the familiar creak of the hinges greeting me like an old friend. The home was warm, filled with the scent of roasted meat and garlic from the kitchen where Camilla had been cooking. I set the wine and the present on the hall table, shrugged off my coat, and listened. Laughter spilled from the living room, Helen's loud, commanding laugh, Clarissa's high-pitched chatter. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders. I could do this. I'd done it before. Smiled through the comments, nodded along while they ignored me. But tonight felt heavier. Like the weight of the last 6 months was pressing down all at once. I didn't know what was coming, not yet, but I could feel it building. This house, with its high windows and polished floors, it wasn't mine anymore, if it ever had been. And as I stepped inside, I had the sinking feeling that tonight I was going to find out just how far they'd go to remind me of that. The front door swung open every few minutes, letting in a burst of cool evening air as guests arrived. The living room hummed with conversation, the clinking of glasses, the soft background of old jazz music. Helen's choice, of course. I had dressed for the occasion, put on a clean shirt and tie, tried to look the part of the good husband. The man who belonged here. Camilla stood beside me, occasionally brushing her arm against mine as she greeted guests, her smile bright and effortless. She looked stunning, hair swept up, wearing a dark green dress that matched the emerald earrings in her ears. I wanted to feel close to her, to feel like we were a team. But every time I caught Helen's disapproving glare or Clarissa's smug glances, that hope slipped away. They didn't want me here, and it was getting harder to pretend I didn't notice. The guests were mostly Helen's friends, older, well-dressed, loud. A few neighbors who gave me polite but distant nods. And then there was Clarissa, floating around like she owned the place, phone in hand, snapping pictures for her influencer career. She had been living off Camilla's generosity for months. No, not just Camilla's, mine. Since I was the one paying off her credit card every time she overspent on clothes or trips. At first, I didn't mind. She was family. I figured she'd get her act together eventually. But tonight, the way she smirked at me like I was some kind of joke made my jaw tighten. Then Philip walked in, Camilla's brother-in-law, married to her cousin who couldn't make it tonight. Philip was everything I wasn't, a successful entrepreneur, confident, charismatic, always in a sharp suit. The entire room brightened when he arrived. Helen practically rushed to embrace him. Clarissa squealed. Even Camilla's expression softened in a way it hadn't for me all night. I stood there, hands in my pockets, watching them fawn over him. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. I didn't need their praise or approval. But seeing how easily they accepted him, how they treated him like family, stung in a way I couldn't ignore. Dinner was about to start. The smell of food filled the air, and I followed the crowd into the dining room. The table was beautifully set. Camilla had outdone herself. Grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, a salad with tiny tomatoes she had picked herself, the fine china, the expensive silverware. I was hungry, tired, just wanted to sit, eat, and maybe, just maybe, enjoy myself for a moment. But then I noticed something. The table was set for 6. I stopped, counted again, 6 plates, 6 chairs, but there were 7 of us in the room. My seat was missing. I stood there, frozen, as realization sank in. This wasn't an accident. It was a message, and as laughter rippled around the table, as Helen smirked and Clarissa giggled behind her hand, I looked at Camilla, waiting, hoping. But she just stood there, smiling. And in that moment, I finally understood. This house was never mine, and it never would be.